We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vellet. Hey, BraveCo men, we are back this week with, of course, one of my best friends, Aaron Zint. And if you haven't listened to the last episodes with Aaron and I, you can go back in time, dig through the archives and find some of our episodes. Aaron is just a phenomenal man. He leads our men's, the Wholeman Project here at Bethel Church. So you're over that, which is basically to help men live happy, healthy, whole lives, guys who are struggling with addiction. Mm. And then also you wrote a book, which we've talked about before, Numb to Known. Yep. And that's just an incredible resource for anybody out there that's trying to break addictive cycles in their life. And we're going to dive in today and really get down to the nitty gritty of how to break an addictive cycle. And I love this. If you haven't watched the podcast a lot, if you're new to it, I bring Aaron on about once every month and a half just to really hash it up. What's like deep in his heart or what's in my heart. And I just love having conversation with you, bro. So thank you so much for coming on again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
And we deal in addiction, I should say. We deal in addiction. We do. It kind of sounds funny, but we are just in men's lives day in, day out, even women's lives, honestly. Yeah. Because obviously addiction is not just limited to men. I work a lot with married couples, as do you. Right. And so it just feels like we're constantly helping people understand, okay, how did you get here? The porn is not really the problem. We've talked about that a lot. You know, the acting out isn't the problem. The, overeating isn't the problem. And we do so much stuff as a culture, as a community to try to get people to stop using the substance.
Right.
And I think we would both agree that just stopping, right? Like stopping to stop overeating or stop looking at porn doesn't solve the problem.
Right. Yeah.
And also, the more you really understand what's happening, how you got to where you're at and how it works is like a massive key to really unlocking and feeling really powerful in your life. And you can talk a whole bunch about this, but just in setting this up, I know for me, when guys break a cycle in their life or when guys quit doing something that they are stuck in, like masturbation or pornography, or let's even take one like anxiety. So I've worked with so many people that went through a really anxiety-filled time in their life, but they don't know how they got out of it. And they're always afraid that they're going to get back into it.
Right.
And it becomes this prison, right? Like porn is a lot like that. Like if you were looking at porn and then you kind of quit, but you're not sure how, you just feel like, God, I hope that thing doesn't come back.
Yeah. Like you lost the tail and you're like, wait, they're not following me anymore. You don't know how to stay away if you don't know how you got away.
But I love just helping people really understand and piece together like, okay, stuff is like math. It's more like mathematics than it is like just random things that happens.
Right.
And when you start to really understand the steps and the math and how you got there, gosh, it makes so much sense and you can be really powerful over the different cycles in your life. And so, Aaron, let's talk a little bit about what is a cycle and then how do we actually break it? What are the steps to breaking that cycle?
Right. Well, we would start with probably Dr. Patrick Carnes, who's kind of like the godfather of sex addiction and healing sex addiction and helping people work through that. He's got a rehab center in Arizona and just like phenomenal work. In his book, Out of the Shadows, where he really breaks down sexual addiction, he says there's this cycle that every person who's addicted to sex goes through. And I guess we should start by saying this kind of caveat. There's when we say the word sexual addiction, it sounds really intense.
Yeah.
And so a guy who's like, I look at porn like once every 3 months. Is that really a sexual addiction? My answer to that would be, it doesn't matter what you call it. If you don't want it in your life and it's repeating itself, like that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah.
So if you're like, too big of a word for me, this doesn't apply. If you feel like you've had a hard time saying no to anything cyclically, like multiple times within a year or whatever, this applies.
It kind of hurts our feelings, right? Because we're like, I'm not that guy that's chasing every woman, like has to have sex or I'm sweating,
yeah.
you know? Like
I've never been to a prostitute. So yes.
Yeah, it really hurts our feelings to go like, oh, but I actually can't stop a cycle that no matter how big or how short that cycle is, if you can't stop that cycle and it's been in your life for a long time.
We would call that the addictive cycle. So, so I'll just start by saying that, but he breaks down the addictive cycle looks like this. It starts with preoccupation. This is where we would say we get triggered by something, an image. This could be a feeling, a thought. It could have been an interaction with a coworker. It doesn't really matter, but you have some sort of thing that cues you off and starts your mind going like, ooh, you know, it'd be like really good. Maybe just perusing YouTube. And a lot of times,
have you ever done that before?
Oh, never. Yeah. It starts off, at least for me, and I think a lot of guys can identify with this, especially when you're like in the Christian realm and you're like, you don't ever articulate in your mind. That's not true ever, but a lot of times you don't think, I'm going to go look at porn now.
Yeah.
You think,
give me something hardcore right now.
Yeah. It doesn't start like that. Usually it's like, man, I don't want to feel this thing that I'm feeling. We don't usually articulate that either. But then we start going to say YouTube just to get the monkey off our back, whatever we're feeling. But what you're looking for internally is something to soothe something or to distract. And so you keep going, you keep scrolling, and you can watch benign things for hours, but you see that one little thumbnail clip with a girl who's scantily clad or some sexually suggestive thumbnail, and it pulls you because you're already in the mode of looking for something to pull you away from where you're currently at. And so that's how the preoccupation would start. Like this drive to go after this thing, even if you're not actually going after the thing that we would typically say is part of the addictive cycle. So that's where it starts. And the preoccupation, it just tends to build because we tend to feed it. Little by little, we feed it.
It's almost like we gain courage too, and not a good type of courage, but like you start out with, I'm just gonna scroll Instagram and this girl's got some really good tips on fitness. Right? Yeah. It's horrible, but because we're lying to ourselves, right? And then you kind of feed that, and before you know it, you're diving into like you've gone through that ice breaking.
Yes.
And then now you're like, well, you're going to take us through that.
It starts ramping up from there. And really with the preoccupation, it's really what's happening in the mind. And the next step in the cycle, so preoccupation is one, the next step in this like 4-step process is called ritualization. You perform this ritual, and this is probably one of the more powerful things I've observed when I look internally and at the ways I've acted out in the past. It tends to repeat itself over and over. We are so much more predictable than we think we are. This, I acted out. I looked at porn. I did this. I don't know how I got there. Like, actually you do. If you took 5 minutes to think about it, you'd tell. So your ritual, for me, it was the preoccupation is thinking about it, is the desire for it. And the ritual is where I would start just scrolling on YouTube. So my ritual as spelled out.
It's like your go-to.
Yeah. It's the natural next step. It's what feels most natural. And the reason it feels most natural is because that's the pathway that's carved into your brain. As soon as the preoccupation starts, you go, ooh, I know what to do next. That leads me eventually to where I need to go. Even if you're like internally battling against it, the first step is usually fairly benign.
So it's like the guy who gets off work, who's stressed, right? Who starts thinking, man, it'd be good to have a drink right now.
Yeah.
And then, he pulls over to the bar that he always goes to.
Yeah.
And sits at the seat that he always sits at.
Yeah. Or the guy who's like really not wanting to drink, he stops by AM PM because he's like, well, I'm at least thirsty. And then he goes, looks at the Gatorade and notices the beer over there. And then he walks past the beer to go check out something else and walks past the beer again. And that for him could be part of his ritual where he goes, well, I'm not actually going to get a beer. I'm just stopping to get a drink.
Yeah.
And so it, could be as intense as go to the bar in his favorite spot, or this, the rationalization. This is all part of the addictive cycle, lots of rationalization.
Yeah, that's true.
And so you perform this ritual. And for me, it was scrolling YouTube or going like, I wonder what's on Netflix. And then you just kind of perusing through until I would start just ramping it up a little bit. Like you said, you start gaining courage within your ritual. And that's part of the ritual, is where you don't want to go to a certain place, but you kind of just ease yourself into it. And so then eventually I'd see something that was more and more sexual until my heart is racing. This is part of the ritual as well. This is what I'm looking for: a racing heart, adrenaline's pumping. And then I'm like, okay, what's the next thing? Well, I need to like fulfill this. Like, I can't just stop here. Some people can, but that's typically not part of their ritual, is actually stopping. So then you eventually get to the acting out itself, which is the place where you go, oh, I've crossed the line for myself. I have looked at this thing. I have done this thing. Doesn't matter what it is. Drank the beer, looked at the naked woman, masturbated, whatever. And so the acting out is the third part, where you actually perform the act. And the fourth part, the step that follows that cycle, is the despair, as Patrick Carnes would call it. Despair, where you feel hopeless and you feel shame and you're like, oh, why did I do this again? And then from the shame and despair and hopelessness, you want to soothe that, numb that. And we know the direct path to that is the preoccupation. And for that cycle, for some guys could be daily. And for other guys, for me, it was probably like every other month to quarterly, within the year. I'd have, after acting out the shame and despair, be like, oh, dang it, I did it again. But I'd also have this new resolve, because one, the pressure, I have just like let off pressure a bit by acting out.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you have enough drinks and it takes off the inhibition a little bit, and you're just like, oh, things feel a little better. It's the anesthetic, it's the numbing agent, to where you go, oh, I don't feel pain in my knee that I dislocated anymore because I have a bunch of numbing agent there. So you're like, I'm going to start running again after this bum knee, and then until the numbing agent wears off, which for some guys is daily, some guys is monthly, some guys is whatever.
Yeah. It's wild, because I think it's so easy to just try to, man, I'm just going to try to stop, looking at porn, or I'm just going to try to stop doing this thing, but not really understanding, like, I've got something deep going on inside. And I think a lot of guys are confused because, man, I can go 4 months and not look at anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so there must be something, like it must be the devil, or there must just be something that happens every 4 months, and not realizing that, like, okay, this is a cycle in my life that I have to sit down and actually start to really pay attention to what's going on. Okay. Now that guys start to understand there's a cycle, there's a ritual, what do we do next?
Yeah. I mean, we have a slew of things to talk about here, but we want to narrow down a couple of them that are some of the basics. And the number one basic that I couldn't stress more, and that if you did this bare minimum, you will start to see progress in one way, shape, or form, is connection, getting connected. It's any addiction thrives in isolation, because there's so much shame attached to it. Our desire, shame, tells us like, hey, make sure you stay hidden so you don't get rejected, because who you are is bad.
Yeah.
And so addiction thrives in isolation, because we think, one, that we're too bad to be accepted the way that we are, but two, that we also want to just take care of this. I mean, so often, especially because a lot of my addiction existed within my marriage as well. I wanted so bad to not have to confess to my wife. So I'm like, if I can beat this thing, and not do it ever again, then I don't have to tell her about this time. If that's going to do it.
So with that, I have a question for you. What do you typically recommend to guys? And I've got recommendations too, but a lot of guys are like, man, I want to save my wife from a bunch of pain. You know, I've told her before in the past, it's something I'm working on. Do I tell her every time I'm struggling? Do I tell her every time I've fallen? Like, what do I do?
Yeah. Great question. I would start by saying make sure you have a conversation with your wife about what she wants to know. Because I've heard of some women saying, like, I want to know every time it happens. I've heard of some wives saying, I want to know the details of it, which I wouldn't recommend. But
that's a tough one.
It's tough because for lots of different reasons. But then I would want to know like what she actually wants, because you want to build trust and maintain trust. And if you decide upon something together and you break that, that's an easy way to go, oh, I am for sure hiding from her. The difference between like keeping something that you shared, just say with your guys, with a mentor, versus what you share with your wife, whether it's isolation and hiding, or it's actually part of your plan. Like that's really the difference. Is it part of your plan? If you're acting outside of the plan that you've created with your guys and with a mentor, then you're hiding from your wife. And so that it's nuanced. It's not black and white. And so it just really depends on each person. I personally lean more towards sharing because I know what it feels like to hide things from my wife.
Yeah.
And no matter how much I think that I'm saving our connection by hiding things, I am sowing into disconnection by holding things back from her. That is a big part of my life. Because when we say connection, we don't just mean be around each other or have sex or watch a movie together, or do things together. We mean I want to get known by this person.
Yeah.
And I can't be known by a person when I'm constantly holding stuff back and shoving things down.
And I think that, to me, that's the key, right? Is the really being known means that you know me, you see me, that I don't have these things that are hidden. And man, if you're not fully transparent and vulnerable with your spouse, then you're living with these small amounts of pain.
Yeah.
And this belief system, it's still in there. If she really knew, she wouldn't be connecting to me like this.
Right.
She would be really disappointed, actually. And that belief system just eats away at a marriage. And so I think I'm a bit probably more hardcore in the sense that I don't think that you have to share the gross details of it. And I also don't think that you have to go to her without a real plan.
Right. Yeah.
But the problem is if you don't take ownership with what you're really doing, then you never feel the full weight and the full pain of it.
It's true.
So a lot of what forces us into solving this stuff is the honesty, the pain that it's causing.
Yeah.
And the truth is like, yeah, it's going to freaking suck so bad when your wife's not going to be like, ah, cool, no big deal. You know, like it's all good. She's going to be like, that's what you told me last week.
Yep.
And now I don't trust you.
Yeah.
That's a good day.
It is. It's a gift.
Scary.
It's a gift. It doesn't feel like it, but it is absolutely a gift to get you moving. And sometimes, we get motivated by either vision or pain.
Yeah.
Motivated to change. And sometimes the vision for us, especially when you feel stuck, is so off in the distance or non-existent. And so pain is a great motivator. It's part of how our design to go, oh, that hurts, I'm not going to touch that again. And when we numb the pain or hide the pain, it doesn't hurt as bad. Pain can't be your motivator throughout the rest of it. Yeah. It's a great initiator.
Bro, I think it's a great catalyst.
The catalyst is a great word.
Initiator is great too.
Yeah.
It's like, man, I don't feel like getting off the couch right now. And then you get in a bunch, you're like, I got to pee so bad. I have to pee so bad. I'll wake up in the morning and it's like 3 a.m. I go back to sleep. I only have to pee a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like 3:30 comes.
Yeah.
And dude, I'm going to die. If I lay in this bed any longer, I'm going to freaking die. I'm going to go. And I think that's what you're ripping yourself off of is it really is disappointing. It really is frustrating. It really is painful. And so having to own that, because really you got to own your stuff if you're going to get all the way out of it. And if you start telling yourself, I'm saving the world around me from my disappointment, you're not really going to do that step of connection. And so I think that we should talk later in this podcast, if we both remember, about how to tell your wife.
That's great. Yeah.
But I think we were headed towards, okay, what next? The first step is connection.
Getting connected.
Yeah, because we should also talk a little bit, and I know we've talked about this a decent amount, but just for the sake of men, your problem with porn or whatever X thing that you're addicted to, it didn't start yesterday. You know, it didn't start like this is you have a foundational problem.
Yeah.
Right. There's an issue that was much deeper than your sex drive.
Yeah.
Much deeper than your hunger, much deeper than your need for endorphins in the brain. Like this is going all the way back to your past, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really helpful to understand that, because we say, get connected. You need to get connected. But most people's experience of connection was so different than the level of connection that they have to do now.
Yeah. That we're talking about. Yeah.
And so I think a lot of guys feel like I am connected. I'm really connected. Like I go hang out with my guy friends. It's like, yeah, you hung out for 5 hours, but he doesn't know when you were disappointed last.
Yeah.
Like you actually haven't opened up at all. And you didn't share anything about what's really going on in your life. Yeah. Or you spend time with your wife, but she doesn't actually know your fears, or you haven't shared an emotion, right? So we'd say that connection happens through the exchange of emotion. Yeah. That's at least one massive way that connection happens.
Yes. Yeah.
Go all the way back to your childhood. Where were you sharing emotions in your childhood? Was that happening? And when you shared your emotions with your parents, did they lean into that, or did you get punished by that? And so I think that there's a lot of confusion for men. I see this happen a lot, is they go like, dude, I hung out with my wife this week. We had sex. I'm hanging out with other guy friends. We're talking, you know, like we're going fishing. We're doing all that stuff, but I'm still struggling. It's like, you're not connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're hanging out, but you're not connected, because your problem, the actual real problem in your life. So I can't remember who coined this phrase, but they say addiction starts when you can no longer bear being present in your life. It's like, well, where did that happen?
Yeah.
Where in my life can I pinpoint, like, how far do I have to go back to go, when was I no longer present in my life? And then why? So was it your dad who was out of control? Was it your environment that was really chaotic? Was it your mom who divorced your dad and now you're going back and forth? And it's so, you know, there's so much pain involved that you no longer want to be present in your life. Like, to me, mapping out some of that, and we can make this a 20-hour podcast, but
course, yeah.
I think just for the sake of like putting a little bit more backstory around addiction, if you don't solve the origin, if you don't or at least understand the origin of your behaviors, then it's like I'm fighting this uphill battle. And part of what I think makes it a fair fight, a much more fair fight, is when I understand, I can go, I don't have so much hate towards me because of what I'm in, because I actually understand that what I'm in probably wasn't my fault.
Right. Yeah.
And I've talked about this a decent amount in the podcast before, but when you start to understand that you didn't pick your parents, you didn't pick how you were treated, you didn't pick your environment, you didn't create your culture, you didn't even create your own belief system about life and you and how awesome you are. That was all created for you. That was a gift by your parent. That was your first inheritance was was your inheritance of identity. Who am I to this world? How much am I believed in? How much am I loved in? Okay. Out of that creates either really healthy self-acceptance or self-hatred and punishment and perfectionism. If you can understand that, just that alone. Yeah. Okay. Wasn't my fault that my dad didn't like me. Wasn't my fault that my parents got a divorce. then you can start taking off these lenses that something's wrong with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That there's something inherently wrong with who I am as a human, or I am worthy of love. Because if you were told that you weren't worthy of love, I'm just giving a bunch of options. If you were told that you weren't worthy of love, then you walk around still believing at 35 years old that I don't deserve love. Well, you didn't create that message.
Right.
Somebody else created that message. And so it makes it really hard to get out of this cycle when you have this tape still playing in your brain. And I started to think this a lot, like the voice in your head is often not your own voice. It's the voice of the people that raised you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the message that we play all day long. If your parents thought that you were awesome and hung the moon, when you mess up, you go like, it's okay.
I'm pretty awesome.
Like there's going to be more opportunities.
Right.
But if you're critical, if you're hard on yourself, if your parents weren't caring, that's the voice. It's not even your voice. It sounds like you,
right,
but it's somebody else's.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to break this cycle when you don't understand, like, these aren't even your thoughts. These were thoughts that were handed to you. You were taught to believe and think and operate this way. Not every single person in every single case, but a lot. And so I think too, I feel like I hijacked us a little bit.
Well, this is good because I want to pull this back to connection when you're done.
I think too that if you can understand your story, understand how you got to where you're at, and why you are the way that you are, where this all started, the origin, it makes it a completely fair fight, because now I know what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
I know the message sent to me. I know how I made those decisions. I understand the math.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the math, you're trying to solve a problem without understanding the basics of math.
Yeah.
And I this is a good example. I remember in high school growing up, I was never a great student. And part of why I wasn't a great student is I didn't learn how to learn.
Okay.
Which is a real thing. I didn't even know that that was a real thing until I was far out of high school. But I started out school in grades in a private school, and our private school was very poor. You know, it was one teacher for multiple grades. Well, the challenge with that is if you got behind, you didn't necessarily get a bunch of care. It wasn't a bunch of like, hey, let me help you understand. And if you had a learning disability, like they weren't recognizing that stuff back then. It was just like, what's wrong with you? You know, perform, do what everyone else is doing. And so I had this belief system that I'm not good at learning. I'm not good at math. I'm not good. And I remember getting into algebra. It's crazy, man. To this day, like I couldn't tell you how to do algebra. I never actually learned how to do algebra. I remember for one day, I had understood the concept. I had understood the principles, the rules, right? And I had it for like a day or two, and then I lost it. And I know that's a thing because like my wife will go back and try to do, you know, our kids' homework, and she can't remember. Like she's like, oh, do you do this? Like I lost it, and whatever. It could have been my own fault, you know, maybe I didn't ask the teacher, but I remember like, I just can't get this. And because I couldn't understand the principles, I ended up having to go to like math A, where you got candy for answering questions. Like I was in the
remedial class.
It was bad, man. And I grew up thinking I'm just not good. Like I just don't understand. It became this thing. But after I got out of school and doing life, I realized like I'm actually pretty smart. I can figure a lot of things out. Just no one ever sat me down and taught me this is how to do this. And so because I had this belief system about myself that was true only because I believed a lie.
Right. Yeah.
That's a lot of people that are struggling with addiction. You believe something about yourself that's not even true.
Right.
It's manifesting itself. It's only true because you believe it's true. It's not true because that's actual fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, save me.
So I want to all this stuff, like understanding all this stuff is so paramount because this is the very thing that you will take to somebody else and share and get known by. Like you understand my history when I begin to go, oh yeah, I experienced this as a kid. I experienced this kind of abuse or this kind of, I grew up thinking I was dumb because my dad said this or my mom did this. And somebody else goes, oh man, that sounds hard. And then right there, you have this transaction of getting known on a new level. And then when you start to uncover the belief systems that you have, and not the belief systems in here, because I can tell you what I should believe and what I think I believe, but my actions are telling you something different. So when I begin to look at my actions and go, you know what, I'm actually not sure God is good. I think he may be disappointed in me constantly. And that kind of digging down to some of those things and handing that to somebody else, that's where you really get known. You want to hand them all the, scrape the bottom of the barrel for the ugly, the things that feel ugly and therefore you don't want to share, and hand that to somebody else who can then go, wow, thanks for sharing. Like, you're a good man. I see that, and you're a good man. And that's the basis of receiving unconditional love, is you just presented your condition to somebody and they said, even still, like, you're good and I love you. And so that's how you get known. You have to start to dig into some of the stuff so you can hand that to somebody. Besides the wealth of information that is and the data that it is to help you break out of the cycle, using that information to get known, to get connected is just massively transformational.
Oh, it's such a key, right?
Yeah.
As you're saying this, I'm thinking, man, what would happen if every man listening to this who's married mapped out his past and then set a time aside for him and his wife, we're not interrupted, where he literally went, can I just share what life was like for me growing up? It's funny. I feel like crying. Can I share what I went through and how that affected me and how I felt? Like, golly, how did my dad's disappointment make me feel?
Yeah.
It seems like a really weak thing to do, but you would leave that experience feeling more connected to your wife, and she'll look at you and think you are more of a badass than you've ever been in any accomplishment you've ever done.
Yep.
It's real. And that's like a tipping point in your life.
Yeah.
Because that's the framework for, I went to work today and I felt really powerful. I felt really awesome. I had an incredible day. Or I went to work today and I felt really powerless. And I got really triggered and I'm not doing well. That real-time information, because I think sometimes I'm playing the devil's advocate. The other thing that happens is people say to me all the time, like, gosh, man, you're so vulnerable. You just share so much stuff about your past. I'll share, I had oral sex with a kid when I was 10 years old, 11 years old. And they'll be like, I would never share that. To me, that's not vulnerable at all. I've shared it so many times.
Right. There's no risk for you anymore.
No. What's risky for me is to tell my wife this morning, I feel a lot of shame or I feel a lot of fear about whatever, this thing that's happening that I feel powerless about.
Yeah.
That's real time.
Yeah.
That's the juice.
Yeah.
Right. That's really where that exchange of what's really happening in you in real time matters.
Yep.
Okay. What's the next step? So
getting connected, absolutely crucial. Starting to map out your history and things like your cycle, your ritual, triggers, mapping these things out that are very clearly happen over and over and over again and are very predictable. That's incredibly helpful. I would say that one of the next things that's really important is to understand that we are not our goal here is not to stop a behavior. Feels that way because the behavior has been so detrimental. So if I stop that, everything will be good. Incorrect. You have this
unprecise.
You have this experience in which you get triggered, or you have there's some sort of cue that starts off the ritual. But in between all this stuff is what we want to replace, because on the other side of you acting out in whatever way that is, whatever your addiction is a reward. And we don't want that reward to go away. Now, the reward is not an orgasm. The reward is not, I saw this thing I wanted. The reward is actually, oh, I feel peace, at least for a moment. Or for me, I know porn was an experience of feeling powerful, because I felt so powerless in so many areas of my life that when I went there, I was always in control. I could choose whatever I wanted. Nobody was ever rejecting me. I was in charge. And so this feeling of feeling powerful, that's the reward. We want that to stay. So our job is not even, we do want to decrease our triggers by healing some of the stuff from the past, removing the buttons. But even when we get something cues us off, I feel sadness, I feel shame, I feel fear, whatever it is, or I even see an attractive woman and that kind of starts up. We want the reward on the other side of this. Well, I actually feel peace. I feel regulated emotionally. I feel powerful. And so we want to replace the addictive behavior. We don't want to get rid of the addictive behavior. We want to replace it. I don't want a gravestone that says, didn't look at porn. Like it's not a legacy, and it's the only way that you know that you were like successful is the last time you acted out to when you're dead. And so what I want though is for my gravestone to say what I replaced porn with.
That's great.
That actually gives me the experience of feeling powerful, gives me the experience of regulating myself. And there's a ton of options. The difficulty for a lot of us is it feels like porn is the most efficient, the most effective option. Yeah. And part of the feeling around that is the fact that it's called a supernormal stimulus. There's such a massive dump of dopamine that is unnatural to normal things in the world. Burger, really greasy, fatty, sodium-filled burgers will do the same kind of thing. Supernormal stimulus, sugar, and drugs obviously do that same thing where it dumps a massive amount, so that normal activities in life don't feel as exciting. But when we start to replace that, and there is a period of detox anytime you break an addiction where it just sucks because you don't have the same woo anymore. But as your brain begins to heal, the dopamine levels return to like a normal level. And I've heard this testimony a lot, you can experience normal life in such a powerful way. So this is the testimony that I've heard multiple times. A guy's like, I was driving down the road and I realized how blue the sky is. I never noticed before. I never noticed what like the sound of the birds outside. And it's a lot to do with nature, but they're beginning to get the experience of dopamine from normal life because we've removed the super normal dump of dopamine. And so I remember walking down the street, having some period of sobriety and seeing this tree that was reached over the whole street from one neighbor's yard across the street into another neighbor's yard. And I was like, how have I literally never noticed that ever before? It's because my brain's returned to a normal state. And so, but we have to actually pick things that we can replace it with. Hobbies, adventure, you need self-regulating tools, very basic things around breathing. Connection is such a massive part of that replacement where we can actually feel a lot of stuff going on. We share it with somebody and suddenly we have a measure of peace that we didn't know was possible just because I shared it with somebody. The connection codes people, Dr. Glenn and Phyllis Hill, would say that regulating yourself, you do need to learn how to regulate yourself, but co-regulating using another person by sharing your emotion with them is 80% more efficient. It uses 80% less glucose in your blood in order to get regulated using somebody else. It's just like you have an electric vehicle versus, a gas guzzler. You get there so much quicker and you realize like, oh, wow, I used to use porn to get to this place. And now I actually have like 3, 4, 5 guys, however many that I can call, have a quick chat with, and then I get there. And then I don't have all the extra shame and stuff attached to acting out.
So I want to just like peel a few of these layers apart and dive a little bit deeper because it's easy to miss fully what's really happening. The supernormal stimuli is a real thing where your brain is receiving such high amounts of dopamine at one time that you get used to that being normal.
Yep.
And then you become numb to anything else.
Yeah.
And when you become numb to anything else, it's hard because you don't know that you're numb.
Yeah.
You're just walking around feeling normal. and everything else in life seems really boring.
Yep.
I'll go play basketball with the friends. I don't really want to go play basketball. Hang out and go for a walk with my wife. Not really that much fun. It's like, because I've got a party. I've got freaking AC/DC in the back of my room every day. And that's what I do. I go to this rock party, right? Like that's what pornography is, or that's what binging, high amounts of calories it does for you. It just goes like, this is the stuff right here. Everything else. I remember, gosh, I got off of sugar 20 years ago. When I say sugar, drinking soda, I don't eat ice cream. And I can remember the few times that I have tried like a Coke since then. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
This is it's crazy. It burns so bad. And so I just do like the sparkling water and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, my son recently, major sugar addict. I won't tell you which son, but both of them are. Major sugar addict. So because of physical reasons, his body wasn't feeling good. He quit sugar, right? He's forced to quit sugar. And I keep telling him like, dude, you got to get off sugar. It's so bad for you. Your body feeds off of it in weird ways, but also your brain. It's not good for your brain. And so he was forced to get off sugar. He's been off of it for a really long time now. And he used to make so much fun of me for drinking the sparkling water because he couldn't stand it.
Totally.
Like they would take a drink of the sparkling water and be like, oh God, that's horrible. It's funny now. I gave him a Waterloo. I think it's like cherry lemonade or something like that. And he drank it and he goes, gosh, this tastes like Dr. Pepper.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, it actually doesn't.
Yeah.
But if you haven't drank Dr. Pepper in a long time, it tastes good.
Yeah.
You can taste that subtle because everything's really subtle in those. His body's coming back to normal.
Right. Yeah.
He's not numb anymore.
Right.
So what spikes him isn't this massive shot of Coke or the energy drinks. God forbid you're drinking energy drinks right now, right? You're getting these unnatural amounts of caffeine and sugar that's just jacking you up. So, okay, imagine that that's what you're doing on a regular basis. Imagine that you don't just listen to music. Every day you listen to crazy AC/DC. That's all the music that you listen to. Well, everything else in life just seems really dull.
Yeah.
Imagine that your sexual experiences are hardcore sexual experiences. Well, man, it's why you don't feel like getting out of bed in the morning. You literally become numb. And I'm just really highlighting this because this is happening and guys don't realize how numb they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why it doesn't feel exciting to do what used to feel exciting, why you don't feel innocent anymore is because it takes so much dopamine for you to feel normal.
Yeah.
Not even alive, just normal, which is also why you chase a deeper or a more exciting, high. You're constantly, it's like, well, looking at Playboy, this is not exciting anymore. Just looking at the magazines are like, I need somebody that's moving. Well, I don't need somebody that's moving anymore. I need violence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just continues to progress and progress and progress. Well, how the heck did I get from looking at girls in bathing suits really moving the needle to like, that's not interesting. I've got to watch violent stuff. And I know we only know that because like 80% of the porn that's accessible right now is violent porn.
Right. Yeah.
And so many guys are entering that. Well, how the heck did you get there? Well, you get numb. You get numb and you chase that to where now it's like sex with your wife doesn't feel super interesting because it's just missionary.
Yeah.
And not to be crude, I'm literally saying that's what's happening.
Right.
It doesn't
and
hardly
even
move
if
the needle.
it's not literally missionary, it all feels like the most bland thing you've ever experienced because you've had something that is like kaboom on your brain.
You got rock stars in the back.
Right. Yeah.
That you've been going to. So part of the process in getting out of this cycle is the abstinence process where your brain begins to heal and you don't trust your emotion. You're not asking what's fun.
Right. Yeah.
What feels good, what feels normal. Like you can't trust that because you're not going to feel like doing anything.
No. Yeah.
Especially if you are heavily addicted.
Yeah. You actually, it is a great sign to you if you're in pain emotionally, if you feel really uncomfortable. that is where you have to be in order to cross it over this line that you haven't been crossing, which we would call sobriety and, the recovery areas, but we would call freedom, whatever, is you have to be uncomfortable and feel the things that you've been committed to not feeling.
Yes.
And it's when those show up that you can go, I'm doing the right thing. This sucks right now. The fact that I feel all the rejection and abandonment and fear that I've been numbing out to, because only when you can feel it can you do something about it.
Okay, that's such a good point, right? Because part of what happens is you numb your way out of having to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're not conscious that that's what's happening, especially if you've been in it for a long time. I'm numbing my way out of feeling stress, anxiety, lonely, depressed. Well, chances are you haven't fully solved that.
Yeah.
So when you start getting sober, the more sober you get, the more those things are going to be revealed to you. I remember, so I was on clonazepam and Lexapro for a number of years coming out of my nervous breakdown. I went through a really bad nervous breakdown, lost use of my arms, couldn't walk a mile, sleep 15, 16, 17 hours a day. Literally you'd have to hold a cup of water with two hands. Like I couldn't drive hardly just because pain and constant pain. So they put me on these medications to help me cope with, help me regulate my nervous system.
Yeah.
And so 8 years goes by and I'm like, man, I never abused it. I actually cut my dose down over the years. So I got to the point where I'm like, I don't want to use this anymore. Right. So I started to wean off the clonazepam, which is a diazepine. It was super gnarly. Like you shouldn't be on that stuff for super long. But I start to wean off of it and man, all of a sudden here comes my emotions. Here comes my anxiety. Here comes my fears. And I had to, now I have to go through, there's a point where I'm like, I don't know that I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's real,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I don't know that I can live life without this thing because I don't have the coping skills for this level of anxiety. I have the coping skills for this level of anxiety while I'm on medication.
Sure. Yeah.
So I remember like I had to call a friend. I called Margaret Nagib, a friend of mine she's a clinical psychologist. And she's like, oh, hey, that's going to happen. Like, no worries. You're going to feel those feelings and emotions. Mm-hmm. You're also going to get used to feeling those. It just feels really heightened right now. So part of it's like, it's not just that you don't have the tools. You have the tools. The other side of it is you're feeling more than you've ever felt before. That your body's going to get used to that.
Yeah.
It's almost like being overstimulated. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, like, I went through a dip, right? And then started climbing my way out of it and felt more and more and more. Now I feel more powerful than I've felt, golly, in 10 years. I feel super powerful because I'm not numb. I'm really present. If I feel overwhelmed, I have a tool that works for that. And I worked really hard for that.
Yeah.
But you're going to feel the same thing, whether you're binging food to deal with your emotions or you're binging porn. There's that period, right? That period where it's like, I'm experiencing real disappointment. I need porn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm lower than I've ever been. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I can do this. Or cutting food or alcohol, you're going to have the same experience, right? Like I don't know that I'm going to pull out of this. Okay. You have to trust that part of what's happening is you're less numb than what you used to be. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
This is a good thing. And if you start to use some of the tools, if you start to get connected, you start to talk about where you're at, if you start co-regulating, right? Sharing with somebody else, that's what's going on. You learn over and over again, oh my gosh, okay, I'm creating a new pathway in my brain. I'm creating a new reality, which is what you're talking about, right? Is again, pulling this apart is what do you want to be known for? What's going to be on your grave? Not I quit porn, but I'm a connected, happy, whole man who's leaving a legacy. Okay, what's the new pathway to that?
Yeah.
So I think for guys, like it's really normal to feel afraid or even to feel a little bit of shame because like, man, I'm struggling so hard now when, life's getting tougher, not easier. You're going to go through that period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's okay.
Mm-hmm. You're meant to embrace it. That's how you know you're successful, is that you're actually moving in the direction of feeling the things that you had refused to feel for a long time.
2 things that I want to cover really quick.
Mm-hmm.
How to create a plan,
Mm-hmm.
and then how to tell our wife.
Yeah.
So we've got like 8 minutes left.
How to create a plan. Well, first of all, you cannot do that alone. You have to do that with somebody else, because when we're by ourselves, we are pretty like the most dumb version of ourselves, I think.
Totally.
When we bring other people in, it actually gives us clarity about the things that we just don't know that we don't know. So part of creating a plan is recognizing your cycle. You actually have to map out your cycle.
Great.
So that when you go, oop, this is the start of that. You want to suddenly go like, wow, now I know what's going to happen, even if you wind up acting out.
I'm in step 1 of my ritual.
Yep, exactly. You want to know your ritual. You want to know your cycle. You want to know the things that naturally trigger you, so that instead of just feeling the trigger of fear or some experience, seeing somebody, and just moving unaware into the next stages, you go, oh, this is the thing that usually does those stuff. So you want to map those out. And then you also want to map out, they're very clear and present, you can call them anything, danger zones, red zones, whatever, that, these are the people, places, things, situations, etc., that I typically act out in. It's all part of the cycle as well.
I run into my ex-wife and wow, that triggers me.
Yeah. And I happen to run into her every time I drop the kids off with her. What do you know? And then I look at porn that night. What do you know? So you make a plan with another person to go, when this happens, here's what I'm going to do to get the reward of feeling better after I talk to my ex-wife.
That's awesome.
Here's what I'm going to do, even if it's, it seems like it's not going to be as good. The reward's not going to be as good as what porn does. I want to replace it with something. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to get a healthy meal with somebody. I'm going to actually go on an adventure, whatever. It doesn't matter really, but you need to have a plan for replacing the what porn was, replacing the tool that porn was to get to this reward. So that's what making a plan looks like, mapping out a plan with somebody else. Look for the danger zones, look for the red zones, map out your triggers. So you just want to be a genius at how you got from here to here. And so now, even if you do like have a time of sobriety or freedom, and then you mess up, here's any of the leaders that I have that are leading other men, if they act out in some way, my question is like, okay, so how'd you get there? And right now they're actually really good at it. They're like, well, this happened, then I did this, and I chose not to connect to somebody here.
Yeah.
And they're like, see, that's the problem. It's not, oh, the problem was when you looked at porn. We map it backwards and go, where did I actually lose the battle? I lost the battle when I was like, this is a great time to reach out. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And then you figure out what led me to the place where I don't want to reach out, so this is where you want to become a genius at these things.
So one thing that I think that guys do a lot, is, I've said that phrase a lot in this, but whatever, is we get really good at not jumping back into our cycle. We manage that a lot, but especially guys who have gone through like the 12-step program, is I'm so focused on hitting all my spots, and I'm so focused on the fact that I'm an addict that has to do these things, that you never actually you never let go. Okay, I'm building this legacy. I'm building this life that I'm no longer managing this addictive behavior and addictive cycle. I am now building a new life. Yeah. And it's part of why I tell guys, like, don't count days. Don't count how many days you haven't masturbated, or don't count how many days you've looked at porn. Like, don't do that. At least in my opinion, don't do that. I don't like it when, I don't do that. I think I'm not expecting that I'm going to fall again. I'm not expecting that I'm going to get 332 days and I hope I don't mess up. I'm going to lose a lot. It's like, no, I'm not going to spend my entire life managing this porn addiction. That's not what I'm doing. I had some really poor behaviors because of how I grew up, because of the how I wasn't taken care of, because of how I wasn't regulated. And so now what I'm going to do is, for a while I'm managing this cycle. I'm paying really close attention to it. But as I'm changing my behaviors, as my brain's healing, and as my relationships are healing, and as my actions and my thought processes as that stuff's healing and building, this management over here slowly starts to, and pretty soon I just eat well.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty soon I sleep well. Pretty soon I naturally do connection. Pretty soon and it's not like I don't ever check when I have a red flag.
Yeah, totally.
I do, but I'm not going, okay, be careful of this ritual that you fall into. I'm building this life that's full of, and it's not that I don't have any checks either and balances. I'm just so much more focused on where I am going and what I am building and what healthy looks like, and creating habits that make a healthy whole life, that this slowly dims and slowly dims, slowly dims. So that's where I love to see guys ultimately get to is your action plan, right? Like pay close attention to your action plan, but know that your action plan is building and creating a new culture.
Yeah.
And this plan that you have to do, literally by looking at your paper, and you're going to build a culture, a city, a life inside of yourself that takes over this eventually. Mm-hmm. That's the end goal.
Yeah. Yep.
Real quick, what does it look like? Because I know a lot of guys will probably listen to this and go like, yeah, today's the last day. Like I'm drawing a line in the sand. I know I'm going to be in a little bit of pain, but I also got a whole bunch of guys that are, kicking butt on this road. Like I want to be one of those guys, right? Like I don't want to be stuck anymore. I want to be one of those guys who's reaching their full potential because I'm not walking around numb, right? I'm able to show up to my wife because I feel good about myself. I'm able to be present with my kids because I'm not carrying any shame, right? I'm an example and I'm proud of myself. I want to be one of those guys. Great. How do I tell my wife?
Yeah.
What's a great setup?
I would, actually take some dedicated time. Hey, I need to talk to you. I want to talk to you about something. I would tell my wife, hey, I have to confess something. She kind of mentally prepares herself in that moment. But I do confess, hey, I acted out in this way. I looked at porn, I masturbated, or whatever it is. But that's not where it stops. You bring to her the plan. Like here, you bring to her how you got there. Because the fact that if you can figure out how you arrived there, it's going to give you hope and her hope that there's something you can do different next time because you know how you got there. And if you don't know the answer to that, you go talk to another guy who can help you figure that out. Yeah. And you don't not only bring, this is how I got there, but this is what I plan to do. What do you need? Here's my plan. What do you need in order to feel safe, in order to feel like I'm recreating and repairing the harm that I've done here? So that's the way that I would do it. That would,
Love it.
It's not gonna remove her sadness or her whatever she may experience. And success is not her going, wow, I'm just so proud of you. Yeah. That's not success. A success is you actually getting into the light and whatever come what may.
Yeah.
But you want to this is the way that you can actually start to rebuild trust even in that initial conversation.
It's great. I like, for guys who have no idea what to do. Okay. So even if you don't know how to build the action plan, what you can do is you can set up an appointment with a counselor.
Yeah.
Right. You can, and like the Transformation Center, Bethel Transformation Center has a great addiction program, and it costs money, but it should cost money, right? Because you got to pay for your freedom. And when you put some skin in the game, you'll actually walk through it. So they have a great program. Sometimes I think it's like, hey guys, just let your wife know I'm really struggling. I've been struggling for a long time. I've been hiding it. Mm. I know that that's really painful. It's not fair, right? So you're taking ownership. It's not fair to you. And I'd expect that you would feel hurt, angry, and sad, lonely, whatever. Mm-hmm. You're putting yourself in her shoes.
Yeah.
And then this could also feel really scary, right? Especially if she thought you weren't struggling. This could feel really scary. Here's what I'm committed to. I don't have a perfect plan. I know you deserve one. So I'm committed to, I've already got a meeting set up with the Transformation Center, a meeting set up with, Aaron Zint, or there's lots of different guys or people to go to that I'm going to connect with them. but I also want you to be a part of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to figure out how to solve this for me, but I want you to feel good about the path that I'm on and feel powerful in having a voice in it.
Yeah. That's
And
good.
so I think you don't have to have a perfect plan, but you have to have some plan.
Yes.
Where you're going, I'm going to talk to somebody who knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to do whatever they say, and you're going to feel powerful. You need to feel free. So part of building trust with your wife is giving her permission to feel however the heck she wants to.
Yeah.
And not like she has to coddle and protect you. You made a mess. You've cost her. You don't have to punish yourself for that. But part of what's going to build trust is to go like, I know I can handle your emotions. I can handle you being disappointed. And that's part of what you're going to have to walk through in order to get out of it. So Aaron, great convo today, man.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate you so much.
Yeah.
So guys, a couple things. If you haven't got his book and you're struggling or you just want to grow, if you're one of those men that wants to be able to sit down and have this conversation with other men and explain it help get guys out of their cycles, get Aaron's book, dive into it, learn how to teach it, teach some of it and do a little small group out of it and help guys learn to be powerful and healthy and whole. Or you can reach out, to the Transformation Center, somebody like that. But we want to see every man get completely free from your cycles of addiction so that you can actually be empowered to walk how God's called you to, not free of porn, but powerful, walking confidently, nothing hindering you. And I think in Hebrews, it says, hey, let us push aside the sin that entangles us, that keeps us from moving forward. And let's run this race, kicking butt, going after who God's called us and created us to be. That's what we're going after. And so, Aaron, you're just such a champion for that, man. And I appreciate you a ton.
Thanks, man.
All right, Brave, come in, go out there. Let's kick some butt this week. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.